Hello, my name is Michael Heeney and I'm an architect with Bing Thom Architects. And I'm going to talk about designing the inclusive city. And when we sort of traditionally, or at least when we used to think about immigrant communities, they tended to be in the inner city. It was, you think of the Chinatown, the Little Italy, or the Little India. But the inner city has now become very expensive. And so when people come here, they can't afford to go to the inner city anymore. And they're actually going to what we call the edge cities. And the kinds of cities like Surrey. And these environments are quite different than the inner city. It's all automobile-oriented. It's much more dilute. You don't tend to see many people on the sidewalk. It doesn't have a lot of character. And so it's a very different environment than those inner city neighborhoods where you kind of bump into your neighbors and you sort of share experiences and learn from each other. And so we started working in Surrey about 20 years ago, and that's when this slide was taken of this central area where we are here today. And when you sort of scratched the surface a bit more and sort of looked into it, you found really the most activity, if you could imagine, sort of pedestrian activity, was happening inside the shopping centers, inside these rather ugly buildings on the outside. But inside, that's where all the people were, and that's where the pedestrian activity was. And we had an opportunity about 15 years ago, or maybe a bit more, to design a new university to go in Surrey. And we were supposed to build it on one of these parking lots out here. And we thought, wouldn't it be interesting that instead of building it on the parking lot, we'd actually build on the little bit of activity that we have here, and we'll actually put it right on top of the shopping center. So we actually found a way to drop the university on top of the shopping center and sort of graft it in front. And so we sort of built on that activity in the shopping center, and we leveraged on it. So the university and the shopping center actually started to create a sense of a city center. And so this is what it looks like, or a piece of it looks like inside. The ground floor here is the shopping center, the old shopping center, but there's 3 levels of university space up above, which have laboratories and classrooms and all of that kind of stuff. And we made, and this is another sort of picture of it. You can see the shops in the bottom and up above. And those corridors serving those classrooms are particularly wide, and they have lots of alcoves. And so immediately kids started hanging out there and studying. And what was interesting, we'd go there sometimes, and they weren't wearing SFU t-shirts. This is Simon Fraser University. They're actually wearing UBC sometimes, and Kwantlen College, and it was attracting people from all over the neighborhood to come and kind of hang out there. And it wasn't just these sort of more intimate spaces, study spaces, but we also created some large spaces which were public and accessible and allowed for kind of informal activities. But also it seemed to inspire people to want to do things. So this was the inaugural concert of the Surrey Symphony Orchestra, which had never done anything before, but they were able to find some space, and SFU, through their generosity, set it up, and they had their first performance right here in this space. And it wasn't just inside we were trying to create spaces. It was very important to us to try and get this activity out. And so we provided outdoor space for people to gather, which really didn't exist in Surrey before this. And sure enough, a few months after we opened, after the building was opened, they had a jazz festival, and all kinds of people showed up. And it was quite interesting because people fell in love with the building, but it also, I think it's raised the confidence of the community. And it was really interesting that the city used to have a coat of arms for their emblem, and they actually changed it to the profile of this building because this is what they started to believe in to represent their community. And a few years later, oh, excuse me, I should have mentioned this too. This SFU, this is the smallest and newest of the SFU campuses. But it actually has the longest waiting list to get in. You have to have the highest marks to get into this campus. And the kids here have been doing incredibly well. And so a few years later, we had a chance to design the library, which is just down the street. And it's a great time to be designing libraries because, you know, books aren't the same as they used to be. Libraries aren't about the collection anymore. In fact, they're about a lot of things, and they're particularly, from the architectural perspective, they're about space. And it's providing different kinds of space that support different kinds of activities. So if you want to future-proof your library, you actually want to have a whole menu of different kinds of spaces, high spaces, intimate spaces, that will sort of support all of those different kinds of activities. So we had this site, this rather sort of peculiar kind of triangular site that we were given. And we came up with this idea of these sort of interlocked floors so that sometimes we had double height spaces, sometimes we had single height spaces. And so we were able to sort of provide this menu of different activities or different spaces within this. and we organized it around an atrium. And the building was sort of designed to kind of make you a bit curious, to make you want to come up and circulate around and discover it. And there are lots of places to people watch. You might want to do it on your own, or you could meet a group. And we had lots of little meeting rooms people asked for, so that if they had a business they were running from home, they could actually have business meetings there rather than have to have people come to their home. And we also really wanted to make it a kind of kinetic space, an active space. So every time you came there, it was a little bit different. And so the way we brought the light into the building, the sun tracks around. So depending on the time of the day and the time of the year, it's always a little bit different. And we've provided all of this range of spaces for sort of intimate things, for something where you might sit with a friend. We were really preoccupied with this idea of providing the third space. You know, if home is one space and work is one space, it's that third space. And somewhere perhaps other than a coffee shop for that third space, although we did have a coffee shop in here, as you can see on the bottom. And that's become so important, particularly as people are having to live in smaller and smaller apartments. They need this kind of space to go to. And I'm not sure the librarians around where this was happening, but it was a place for kids to play as well. And these are the high spaces I talked about. So the lower level is the entry, the sort of checkout and all of that kind of stuff. And the upper level is our kind of modern interpretation of the classical reading room. We call it the living room. So it's much less formal, but it's this sort of high, grand space. And it's been wonderful to kind of watch and see how that's being used. In fact, in the morning, the staff do their yoga in this space. And then what we did was, at the ends of these spaces, we've integrated bleacher seating into the stairs. They could actually have performances, different kinds of performances there. And then the room itself becomes a giant amphitheater. So if you have a major civic event, you can actually have thousands of people there. And they can be sitting and they can watch and see all the different activities that are going on. In fact, this is where they had the inauguration for the mayor and council shortly after the building was opened. So we're continuing to work our way through Surrey, and this is the latest building that just literally today broke ground. It's another building for Simon Fraser University. It's their new engineering building, and you can sort of see a big window there, but that's going to have an enormous atrium, which is going tiers up with 4 floors, full of trees and things. That'll be yet another one of these new spaces to introduce into the city. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much.